The Queen's Jewish Link presents the Jewish Living Podcast, the show that examines the many facets of Orthodox Jewish life. Here's your host, Izzo Zwirin.
Happy Hanukkah, everyone. What a wonderful holiday. The candlelight, the latkes, the donuts, the time spent with family, and a cappella music? Yeah, for some reason, a cappella music has become a sort of modern-day minhag, and that is for new Hanukkah parodies to be released by your favorite a cappella group. But these vocal bands are much more than just Hanukkah parodies, and we thought it would be fun to discuss the modern history of Jewish a cappella and just how we got here with this week's guest.
Hi, my name is Craig Resmovits, and I am a member of the Jewish professional a cappella group 613.
Craig will discuss all of those areas and where he thinks the a cappella music genre fits into Judaism as a whole. One more thing, Craig has a fascinating backstory about how he got into the a cappella scene to begin with. If you want to hear that, we added it in at the end of the episode following the credits. All right, Craig, thank you so much for joining me this week. Now, before we get into a little bit of your history, I want to let everybody know a little bit of our history. I met Craig 2 days after my oldest daughter was born in the young Israel of Great Neck.
Right.
She was born and the delivery was in North Shore, and I walked to the young Israel of Great Neck, and Craig was in the minyan and I had no idea who he was. There's met him, and had I decided to name my daughter that day, you would have been the first person to know the name.
Yeah.
I didn't, but that was when I first met you, and that was about 7 years ago, 8 years ago at this point.
I guess you came to Teen Minion that day.
I did. Well, I was told that the trip from North Shore to the Young Israel was about 25-minute walk. I was lied to.
Oh no. Try doubling that.
It was about 45 minutes for me to get there.
Yeah.
So yes, I came to Team Minion because that was the one that hadn't started
yet.
Yeah. But I would have been on time had I been told the correct amount of time. But yeah, that was the first time I met you, and now we live in the same neighborhood, and I'm glad that we were able to make this work, and that you were able to give us some time to join us this week.
It is my pleasure. I'm looking forward to an awesome conversation.
All right, no pressure. So the reason I asked you here this week is to discuss some of the history and up to modern day about a cappella music within Judaism. Now, I don't want to go all the way back to Amoraic times. I want to do the modern history of it. So you mentioned earlier Bitachon. Were they the first real significant ongoing a cappella group in modern day Orthodox Judaism?
They're the first one I've heard of.
Okay. So let's start there. That's probably mid to late 90s, maybe even earlier than that?
I would say, and I don't know, and I tried to get an answer from before coming on here from my friend Jordan Gorfinkel. I haven't heard from him yet, but I would say probably late 80s, early 90s is when the group was formed.
All right, so let's talk about their influence, and maybe bring in some other bands along the way. Do we call them bands, groups?
Bands is good.
Bands
Groups
are
are good. We like to call ourselves a band. We say we're a 6-man vocal band.
If a boy band doesnand play an instrument, then I guess an a cappella.
Yeah. It's funny. I once told a friend of mine, I want to be in a Jewish boy band. I want to record an album, like Chevra and Shoshelas or whatever. And he's like, hello, you're in a Jewish boy band. I was like, oh, yeah, good point.
I guess that's true.
Yeah.
All right, so let's start there. Now, when I think of Jewish a cappella music, my first thought is something along the lines of, this is what we listened to during Sphira and the 3 weeks. Now, I believe that's generally in the beginning. That's when that's when things would happen. Albums would come out before Pesach or before Shiva Asar B'Tammuz.
It's still true now. We broke the mold a little bit finally broke the mold with our 8th album, which is our most recent studio album recorded, called 613 Volume 8 Lights. And you may have guessed that it was released Hanukkah time, right. 8 lights. But yes, you're correct.
So you mentioned, so there's parts of a cappella music where there were Shabbos gigs. I think that was a little bit later than when Bitachon came out. That probably started being very popular around the early 2000s, maybe a little earlier than that.
Yeah.
Let's get a little bit of a background information about what was going on around the time of the 2000s, when there was basically Bitachon, but then there was this explosion of more a cappella groups in the late 90s, early 2000s?
So I think that you can almost not talk about one thing, which is like the studio recording world, which you're talking about is like stuff that people who don't listen to music during Sphera in the 3 weeks would listen to during that times, which there's a big chunk of the Orthodox population that goes in that category. And the Shabbos application, it's like almost one and the same for me. And I'm not good with all my years and stuff, so I apologize in advance for that. But so like Bitachon, one of their, I don't know the order of their albums, but one of their albums is called West Side Zmirot, right? So I think that there was this link to Shabbos that maybe is even more important than what you stated in the origins of it, as something that really Jews have been performing. I know you didn't want to go all the way back, but Jews have been performing a cappella music since Shul was created, right? So, and cantorial music certainly had choirs and group harmony. So with that being said, I actually think that Bitachon and those early groups were maybe more born around the idea of we are a bunch of friends who live on the West Side and get together on Shabbos and make music with our voices. And I actually think that that's where they were coming from, and maybe even the idea to capitalize, so to speak, on those periods of mourning in the Jewish calendar for a cappella didn't come around until a little bit later, like maybe in the early 2000s when you had the Kol Zimra recordings and Lev Tahor happening, pre sort of modern age of Jewish a cappella.
Right.
So actually I think the Shabbos thing, even though it wasn't necessarily Shabbos gigs, that wasn't tapped into as an industry, which now it's huge, and it's been huge for many years, at least since before I got involved. But I think the idea of sitting around a table, singing on Shabbos with talented people who are not just singers but musicians, or at least one musician, real musician, to let people know what it is they should be doing, sort of all came from the idea of Shabbos.
All right, so I also want to throw in one more group. You mentioned Kol Zimra and Lev Tahor. I know back in maybe the early 2000s, the Chevra also put out a cappella group.
They did.
A cappella album. But I want you to talk a little bit about the influence of Kol Achai on the a cappella world. I know they didn't have necessarily an album, but each album had one a cappella song.
Yeah, it's not even so much the a cappella element that is so influential, but like when you think of what influenced a cappella in the secular world, what many people think of are Motown groups like the Temptations. And the Temptations didn't record a cappella music, but they brought in this element of tight vocal harmony sounding a certain way that's one reason that even though Stand By Me originally and My Girl, those are not a cappella songs, but those are what a cappella groups can cover most easily and most frequently. So same thing with Kol Achai. It's not only about the fact that, yes, they did record some beautiful a cappella songs on their albums, but it's about all the other stuff that they did that was in that sort of tight harmony, and also, especially with a group that are brothers, it's hard to emulate if you're not family, but the idea of the blend of voices being more important than the sound of an individual voice. In the Jewish world, I think they really introduced us to that, right? Like even now, if you hear two of the big artists in the Jewish popular music world singing harmonies with each other, it's more about, oh, this guy's great, I can go higher, we could sing together, but like I'm listening for the voices, whereas a group like Kol Achai, or even what's going on in the background of a 613 song, is about the group sound, not the individual sound.
Right.
So they really were pioneers in our market for the group sound and the tight harmonies, whether or not it was a cappella.
And if you want to hear an amazing version of the national anthem, it's available on YouTube very easily. There's a Kol Achai national anthem at Shea Stadium, I think on like Jewish Heritage Night.
I love the accent.
Yeah, they're singing it with an Israeli accent, and they absolutely nailed it. It's the only time, except for maybe the Whitney Houston version of the national anthem, that I got goosebumps listening to a national anthem.
You ever hear Hendrix on guitar?
I have heard the Hendrix. That's from the Woodstock Festival.
Yeah,
I believe.
incredible.
That is incredible. You're right, but that's not vocals.
Yeah.
Yes. But if you want to hear a really good one, the Kol Achai national anthem at Shea Stadium, I'm guessing in the late 90s, 97, 98, something like that.
Yeah,
it
looked like
absolutely
that.
fantastic.
Their glasses made it look like it was that time.
I I want to fast forward a little bit to today. Like probably the two most recognizable names in acapella right now are your group 613 and the Maccabeats. Now you guys do very different styles, and the most interesting thing is what you do in terms of your your song choices, your playlist. The 613, you guys focus mostly on original music, and Maccabeats generally do covers. But I don't want to like disparage anybody this way. A cappella music, even in the non-Jewish world, take your pick of the best a cappella song groups out there, Pentatonics or Rockapella. Most of them, Rockapella doesn't really do anything anymore. They do a little bit. They're doing mostly covers.
Mostly.
They have one or two original songs. Why does a cappella focus mostly around covers? Why aren't there too many original songs being sung by a cappella groups?
It's a good question. And before I answer it, which I definitely will, one thing that is just important to note, and I'd have to get to at some point, what you said about 613 is not what a lot of people know 613 for. So you guys know us for our parodies around the holidays and for our covers and parodies, whereas if you listen to us on Apple Music, Spotify, or bought our albums, you would know that probably a good 65 to 75% of our music are original songs, and we'll talk about it all later. So why do a cappella groups, both secular and Jewish, tend to cover other stuff? It's a really good question, and I'm not sure I know the answer exactly. But I think when you think of a cappella as an alternative type of music, that lends itself more to a cover, right? I've heard this song this way, but now let me hear this song that way.
It's gimmicky.
I wouldn't call it...
To somebody who's just a music fan, not necessarily a musician,
Right.
it could be like a gimmicky thing, like
Right.
something that I want.
It's a
to know.
novelty.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it's definitely a novelty, and the idea is I want to hear this song that's on the radio, or this song that I heard a live band play, and hear how you can emulate it or change the style of it by using only the human voice, which has, in my opinion, and of course I love a lot of types of music. Certainly a cappella music is not the only kind of music that I listen to or perform, honestly. It's maybe not even the majority of what I perform. But it's got this unique sound to it. It sounds, there's just something about the human voice, especially from an emotional perspective, and even like, it's beauty, but it's also like a haunting quality that it can have sometimes, that is unique. And people want to hear their favorite songs done that way. So that's the cover. So if you think of yourselves more of an a cappella group, then you're going to be doing a lot of covers of other people's music. Let's see how I can take other stuff and emulate or change it. Right. But if you really think of yourself, and it's just a different approach, as more of an artist or a band that's you using your creative juices to create brand new music, it's possible to also happen to be doing it in an a cappella style because that's your experience, that's your personnel, that's what you love. So I think 613 is a little bit more of that, to be treated more like a band or any artist that happens to sing our music in the style of a cappella, as opposed to like a collegiate a cappella groups especially. And the Maccabeats, don't forget, started as strictly a collegiate a cappella group, have notoriously done almost all covers. And by the way, we do lots of covers and parodies, and the Maccabeats have a few original songs too.
Right. And I would say that by most, probably the most successful recording group in history is probably Rockapella, I would venture.
Yeah, I don't know the numbers, but certainly Rockapella. I mean, Pentatonics might be giving them a run for their money. Pentatonics also have some original music.
Right. Rockapella's most famous song is going to be Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego, which is an original.
It's an original.
Right. So there are exceptions, but for the most part. We mentioned earlier that a cappella music in the Jewish world generally focuses around, the times when you can't listen to regular music. But of late, I feel like the most busy time for most a cappella groups is around Hanukkah, and you see that when, I'll mention you guys again, 613 and Maccabeats, they generally release things around Yontif time, and often new songs, new parodies, new versions of things come out at around Hanukkah. Why did Hanukkah become such a big deal in the a cappella world?
So it's very interesting, the connection between the phenomenon of... You also have to dig into why the Jewish viral video, so to speak, which obviously would come out during the holiday season, I could talk a little more about that in a second, has been done primarily by a cappella groups. So that's interesting. I have a guess at that, and my guess, and I'm not sure about this, but my guess is, so people like us and the Maccabees, right, we are trying to reach a little bit of a different or more inclusive, a little bit of a wider crowd than some of like the mainstream from pop artists are trying to reach, I think. So if we're trying to reach out to not only the frum, or even not only the, what you would call maybe the ultra-Orthodox, right, the yeshivish and Hasidish communities, if we're trying to reach not only them, but also less observant Jews or different stripes, all different types of Jews, so then you need to be practical about how you do things.
So you're going to be doing things at times when maybe the not so Orthodox inclined Jew is paying attention. Hanukkah, Pesach, Rosh Hashanah.
Exactly, and those are the big three for us, by
Right.
the way. Certainly Hanukkah and Pesach, by far and away, are the two most popular ones for us to sort of try and get this attention. And it's a few things. I think the holidays are more on people's mind. Like what you're saying is more like, well, if you're somebody who's more involved with their Judaism a little bit more seasonally and involved a few times a year, so we're trying to get you to see our stuff at one of those times where you're thinking about your Judaism. But it also has to do with the media, because what makes our videos really successful when they are that next level, we have a few, the Maccabees certainly have a few, that really reached, those like million view benchmarks. It's propelled by media. And nowadays it's really social media, but it's also news media. And so, Fox and ABC and CNN, they don't want to have a Shabbos segment on Friday, but they want to have a human interest story about, or it's just something nice to say about Hanukkah and Pesach during seasons where there's so much going on about non-Jewish holidays, and they realize a lot of their viewership, a big chunk, are Jewish and feel a little bit left out almost. And I think it actually has less to do with the a cappella, back to your question, less to do with the a cappella quality of it, and just more to do with the difference between our backgrounds and some of the backgrounds of the other artists and who we're trying to reach versus who they're trying to reach. Like, it's interesting that you could see a Shweki video or a Benny Friedman video, and I admire these guys like crazy and love any opportunity I have to work with them or even just listening to their work. They might have so many more views than us, but their couple million views, it's not brought up in the mainstream media as a viral video, right? Whereas if we have something with 1 million or 2 million views, it's something that's on the news, and it's because they are just reaching like every single frum person, whereas we are reaching a smaller percentage of a wider cast net, which is basically Jews or anybody that's curious or interested in the Jewish holidays.
So do you see yourselves not only as like an artist, not only as musicians, but is there something that gives you the thought that maybe we're doing some religious good in the world?
For sure. Something that we have in common with the Maccabees definitely is there is an element of kiruv going on, and it's very complicated because especially with us, like we ourselves are a very diverse group when it comes to Jewish background and Jewish experience in our lives. But we have heard stories of kids who go to a public school who say, I'm in a school with thousands of Jews, and your video made me feel cool to be Jewish, or just made me more comfortable with my Judaism. It made it more relatable to me. And for every one of us, no matter what our background is, or even our how we identify or our level of observance, we take the Jewish responsibility aspect of what we do very seriously. And it's one of the, if not the most, one of the most fulfilling parts about being in 613 is reaching people and just bringing them a little closer to their Judaism and spreading positivity that people link with their Judaism sort of in their minds, and it just makes them feel good, and proud, right? That's huge for us. Proud to be Jewish. Like, if we can accomplish that, it's one of the greatest feelings that we have.
That's awesome. We've dropped the name Rockapella so many times already in this conversation. I want you to talk a little bit about a man named Sean Altman and his contributions to the Jewish a cappella scene.
Sean Altman is a very cool guy. I've had the pleasure of doing numerous improv type performances with him. So Sean, I don't know his whole story, but he is somebody who grew up in a secular Jewish environment, and he is an excellent musician, arranger, singer, composer, right? He is the original composer of the "Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego" song. And in the process, so he was very famous touring, especially in Asia. They were huge over there with Rockapella, probably in the 80s and 90s. And I think along the way, he met a person that you've heard about, Jordan Gorfinkel, who is one of the people who runs Kol Zimra. I don't know how they met, but Gorf does a lot of really cool stuff, so it might have had nothing to do with music on his end. And Gorf was running this group Kol Zimra, and he sort of brought Sean in, and Sean would go to some of the weekend performances because there's a lot of need for singing secular music as well as Jewish music. When it comes to this improv, we're covering a lot of doo-wop type stuff, which is really like right in Sean's wheelhouse, obviously from Rockapella. And he really loves doo-wop. Like we've done concerts with
It's
stuff.
not a common thing for somebody to really be into, but yeah.
No, Sean, that's like his whole mahalach. It's incredible. And he's great at it. Great at arranging it, great at singing it. When he sings backgrounds, leads, he's amazing. So he must have met Gorf at some point, and they started collaborating musically. And Sean really left a lasting impression on us, and continues to, because he brought his style of arranging and singing to the sort of Jewish a cappella world, most notably from a recording perspective with Kol Zimra's Songs of A.B. Rodenberg album, which he recorded, he arranged, he performed a lot of the vocals on, even some of the lead vocals, which are very convincing, by the way. Sounds like someone who's been speaking Hebrew his whole life,
Right.
which not the case. And he brought his sound to it, and I think changed what we do forever.
And he's still involved today.
Yeah, yes, definitely involved today. He also has a very cool act that you could, if you type Sean Altman on YouTube, I'm sure some of his funny Jewish parodies will come up. It's not for everybody, for sure.
Listen at your own will.
Yeah, but it's hilarious, and he's great.
Okay, so now that we kind of bridge the gap between Jewish and maybe non-Jewish a cappella, I'm going to ask you a little bit about probably the most famous modern-day thing that happened in a cappella, and that's the sing-off. So first of all,
The sing-off.
your opinion about the show itself, and were you guys ever trying to try out for that show?
Okay. The show, obviously, let's talk on a personal level. I was
Sure.
obsessed with it. I thought I knew better than the judges. We all did, like.
You know what? I literally just talked to a magician and asked him if he knows more about a Penn and Teller, Fool Us. And he's like, yeah, sometimes they pretend to be fooled.
Yeah, yeah.
When they're definitely not, because I got it from here. So, yeah.
Yeah. So, actually, my friend Morty Weinstein, who's a very good friend and another member of 613, he used to have, and it comes up on my Facebook memories, like a running commentary of every week. He was like, this should be more this, and that should have been more that, and the judges don't know what they're saying. Why don't they criticize? This group is so good. So it's very funny. So it's an amazing show. I really wish it was still around, to be honest with you. I loved watching it, pretty much, obviously. And it did amazing things for a cappella music in general, right? I mean, maybe rockapella, but it had at the very least, been a very long time until an a cappella group had been able to cross over straight into that pop market the way Pentatonics has, who Pentatonics won season like 2 or 3 of the sing-off, and that was like a transcendent moment in a cappella music. And that show being front and center made what we do more relevant, and it's cool because we were already doing it. So and in the Jewish world like that, there's so many factors like that, and then the Shabbos thing all like coming together, it really, really made a big impact, and it took something that was more of like that novelty gimmicky thing and brought it into the public's eye a little bit. And then the answer to your question is yes, on more than one occasion, 613 has not only applied to be on the sing-off, but we got up to at least once that I can remember. I think there was once before I was in the group also. Basically, what is the very last step of
auditions
being selected for that show. And it's interesting. I mean, it makes sense. Like, TV is all about the story and the sort of novelty of it. So we were very real about it, but we still thought, this could be a story that they'd be interested in. And this was before we were like, quote unquote, viral. So you got to think about nowadays whether maybe that would have given us that like final push, the fact that we had videos with millions of views on YouTube. But we did make it to the final level of auditions. They sent us contracts that we had to sign and stuff. And then ultimately we were not chosen to be on the show.
Oh, yeah, I guess we would have known that by now.
Yeah.
Spoiler,
yeah.
The show's been off the air for like 6 years at this point.
Yeah. It needs to make a comeback.
Yeah. I would have no problem with that. Before I get to you allowing you to plug whatever you're going to plug, I have one more question about 613, and then I'm going to get some personal things. So you guys are famous at this point for putting out your musical parodies, your seasonal musical parodies. How do you decide what you're going to be? Is it just based on whatever big film or musical is popular at that point, and then you try to parody that, or is there any more things that go into it?
So it's funny that you say film or musical, because a lot of the videos that we've done more recently, and a lot of the ones that we're the most well known for, are from movies or musical, well, really musical movies, or even just plain movies, right? The stuff that you think of when you think of 613 is probably Bohemian Hanukkah,
right,
and West Side Story, which we just came out with this week, and maybe Lion King. People love that one, and even Star Wars that we did,
right.
But we weren't always doing that type of stuff. So the first video that we were before my time were recording these videos from before I was in the group, before the Maccabeats existed, pre-Candlelight. There's two eras, right? There's pre-Candlelight and post-Candlelight. We had all these videos, and they were always pop songs. Candlelight, that the Maccabeats did, was a pop song, right? Our first one that went quote-unquote viral, Shake It Off Hanukkah, pop song. And then the one that followed that, Uptown Passover, also
I enjoyed that one.
A pop song. Yes, that's one of my favorites, too.
Bruno Mars is very easy to turn into a cappella.
Yeah, and Bruno Mars from one of his accounts actually shared our video or commented on it or something. It was very, very cool. It was very cool. And he's like a legit incredible musician.
He's an A-list musician.
And not just that, like with a lot of musical integrity too.
Right.
And just as a performer, he's phenomenal. So we used to always do pop songs, and this was the process basically. It was like we have to wait until the very last second, because the way the world works nowadays, it's like things are hot for a second, and you got to just catch it while it's hot, because what's number one on the Billboard charts today, maybe in a week and a half from now, is going to be like number 30, right? So we were always trying to wait as late as we could, and then it was always a mad rush to get everything done, of course, and find what's hot right now that also could work for us lyrically and a cappella wise, and then we'll be like, okay, we'll do that. So we used to choose way at the last second, because it was like, okay, what's the number one song right now? Taylor Swift has the song Shake It Off. It just got to number one. I'll probably spend some time there. We're going to do that. And then the next one was like, Bruno Mars has Uptown Funk. It's been a few weeks maybe at number one, but it's still holding strong. And by the way, that song broke records for how long it stayed at number one on the charts. And so let's do that, right? But we ran into some issues with sometimes we would choose something, and then a few weeks later, by the time Hanukkah or Pesach rolled around, it wasn't so hot anymore. And then sometimes it was just so overwhelming to try and get, because we got to, and different people do all this stuff, but we have to write the lyrics, arrange the music, record the music, edit, mix the music, okay, and then
shoot the music
set
video.
the scene, like work with whoever was directing that particular video to figure out what the visuals are going to be, then shoot the music video, then edit the music video, then do all the cuts of the music video and the revisions and the reviews, and then it was finally ready, right? So you need a little more time, and it just got crazy. Like, I mean, we were very busy. Our director and the video guy were up like till 4 a.m. every single night, back and forth with revisions. And of course, now that we do things a little more in advance, of course, still like we're tweaking until the end,
right,
but it's not that same crazy rush.
But now you're picking things, I guess, that are more, timeless at this point.
So they're not actually timeless.
Lion King, I would imagine, I would argue, is timeless.
No, they're I'm not saying they're not timeless. Their timelessness is only one factor into why we choose them, right? Yes, Bohemian Rhapsody is timeless. West Side Story is certainly timeless.
And relevant now.
That's the key. Every single thing that we did was relevant right now to something big going on, right? Bohemian. So if you think about the musical or film ones that we did, Bohemian Hanukkah, the Queen movie, Bohemian Rhapsody came out right around when we released it. The Star Wars video, we knew for, I think, 2 years that we were going to do Star Wars for Hanukkah 2019 because we said, that not the last, they'll probably make more movies, but the 9th installment of the main set of Star Wars trilogies is coming out on like December 15th, 2019. We have to do Star Wars that year. So the information is available to us much earlier because when it comes to films and those things, there's this anticipation of what's coming out. Whereas an artist might say, sure, Ariana Grande might say, I'm coming out with an album, but like you don't know what song is going to be a hit.
Right.
As a matter of fact, maybe the music hasn't even been composed yet, certainly hasn't been written yet. So we knew that Bohemian Rhapsody. Then Lion King, there was the live action film. Star Wars, we knew. And there's a film coming out, I think, this week or next week, West Side Story, a remake, which hasn't been done on film in like a million years. And so it always has that more than just like a touch of relevance. And I think that's the key for us, trying to find timeless material that's also extremely relevant in the now.
Phenomenal. All right, I have a set of questions that I ask to musicians whenever they come on.
Sure.
So if you'll indulge me in those. So first question, you prefer performing at a wedding, a simcha, or at a concert?
It's a little bit of an unfair question for me to answer because most of the concerts I do are 613 concerts, and though I do some simchas with 613, I'm very frequently working at weddings, both singing and playing keyboard, and it's very different because it's not even like performing the same music. I would say probably doing the 613 shows is the ultimate fun when you're just with, the guys in the group are some of my best friends in the world, making music that's fulfilling and challenging, but also prearranged and not just improvised, is very, very exciting. And also at a simcha, as you know, a lot of the times the music can be background, which is what it's supposed to be at times. So getting that appreciation from people and actually being able to have a conversation with somebody after they come up to us, this is what we loved about your set, this is what you guys did that resonated with me, is very powerful. So I would go with concert.
All right. Album or song that you don't think gets enough credit, but really people should go give it a second listen?
Sure. So I'll give two answers. One is that I'm going to plug 613. We have a lot of original music, and it's, in my opinion, and I can say this because of all the original songs, I've only ever written one of them, which is not what I'm going to talk about. But
Yellow Submarine?
Yeah. So there is on our third album, the first song, it's probably my favorite pound for pound original 613 song. It's called Kilo Lam Chasto. People know it if you listen to our music, but otherwise you probably wouldn't know it just from our videos and stuff online. And it's not like one of the one or two most famous originals like Al Hanisim, L'Chadudi are probably the most famous. But you should check it out because every time we sing that song, I turn to Mike Boxer, our director, who wrote and arranged that song. I'm like, man, you just wrote such a good song. It's incredible. And then as far as, I'm actually a sucker for that classic Jewish music, yeshivish music type sound. And everyone thinks their time was like the golden age or something. Yeah. But when I didn't grow up with it, like in my house so much. And then when I was in high school, I started getting into that genre and like learning it. And it was just at this time when for me, like the music was just sounding like as really good production wise as it could, which it still does, but while still being more of like that organic instrumentation, less electronic sounding. And for me like around that 2007 to 2015 time is like some of my favorite stuff. And there's an album by David Gabe called Amar David. It's his second studio album. There is amazing music on that album, and I suggest everybody go check it out because it's fantastic.
All right. And my final question for you is if you individually or you 613 could collaborate with another artist or another group, who would you guys want to do it with?
So the one I'll say individually, I'll choose a secular artist. I call Stevie Wonder my Rebbe. So that would be amazing. And then from the Jewish perspective, and it would be amazing with 613, there's so many great entertainers and singers and artists in the Jewish world. But Avram Fried is like phenomenal. And it's funny because I have sung with him the last bunch of years in a row. I've led the choir for the Haas concerts, and he's been at maybe not all the ones I've done, but most of the ones I've done. But it's not the same collaboration, like we're just singing in the background. But to really collaborate with, I mean, his singing, it just gets better and better over the years. He delivers the message with so much power and emotion that it would be incredible to work with him, maybe like a little closer and have some time to really flesh something out.
It would also be interesting because his is a very powerful voice combined with the blend of voices that you guys put together. So
we have recorded with Benny Friedman,
right?
And we've recorded
Fried's nephew.
Yes, but they share some similarities in sound. So maybe it gives you a little bit of an idea of what it could potentially sound like. But it would be a dream come true.
All right, we've been talking so much about 613. Let's give a chance for people to find your work. How can they book you guys? And anything else you might want to talk about.
Okay, so your first job is to check out our brand new video, A West Side Story Chanukah, where we take a few of the classics from the very classic musical West Side Story by Leonard Bernstein. The music is by Leonard Bernstein. And you can check it out on YouTube. You can find it on Facebook. You can find it on our website, which is 613, which is spelled SIX13, 613.com. We are available to follow on basically all the major social media platforms, you name it, we're there. YouTube as well, and our handle is always called at 613sings. So that's at SIX13sings. And you can find us there. There is a book us. Something really exciting. So we, unlike some people in the wedding business, which is something else that I do, we were very dormant for a long time due to COVID. And we are just now finally starting to. This Hanukkah is pretty packed for us. We booked a bunch of shows, and that's really exciting. We love doing shows. We love doing simchas. So please, there will be a Book Us tab on our website, and we would love to speak to you about booking us. If you ever wanted to reach out to me personally, you could find me at my 613 email, which is Craig, CRAIG, at 613.com. That will be forwarded directly to me, and I'd love to work with you on your event. Whether it's a simcha or bringing us in for a concert for your shul or organization. We do a lot of that. I'm doing a few of those just in the next week, gearing up for Hanukkah. So we'd love for you to book us.
And if you guys have like a list of places where you can see if there's a concert that you guys have going on that we could buy tickets?
So yes, we have a tour schedule that's on our website. I would say the majority of our concerts are for like a private organization. So some of them are open to the public and some of them are not, but it will be listed on our website, as well as more often than not, we're outside of the New York area for concerts, but we do certainly do some stuff
We've got listeners all over the United States.
Good point, yes. You could follow us on our website, and we will let you know where we're going to be performing and how you can purchase some tickets to come and see us. Also, our music is available on Apple Music and Spotify to be purchased on iTunes, and we really, really appreciate the support. It's very heartwarming to see people from all over the world listening to our stuff.
And of course, everything that Craig just mentioned will be in our show notes. You can click on those, or you can find their social medias on our social medias, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, etc.
Yep.
All right, Craig, is there anything else that we haven't covered yet that you want to cover? I asked the acapella guy.
What should we cover? I don't know. You'll have to wait until Pesach to find out what we're going to cover next.
All right, Craig, thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having me. It is great to spend some time, hang out, and speak with you.
Phenomenal. My thanks to Craig Resmovits for joining me this week. When I originally asked Craig about why a cappella music has become so synonymous with Hanukkah, I assumed he was going to point to the Candlelight music video by the Maccabees. But the concept of reaching people through music, and particularly around the various holidays, is particularly poignant. Jewish tradition is always better when there are two things that go with it: good food and good songs. I'm glad we have people out there who recognize this and are able to use their gifts to reach those who might not be otherwise inclined to study up on their roots. With that, I wish you a freilich Hanukkah, and as always, Kol Tov.
The Jewish Living Podcast is produced by Sreli Paikus. Our theme song is The Band by A.B. Rottenberg. Follow us on Facebook at The Jewish Living Podcast and on Twitter and Instagram at Jewish_living. You can also email the show at jewishlivingpodcast@gmail.com. The Jewish Living Podcast is recorded in conjunction with the Queens Jewish Link.
So I want to get a little bit of a background about you. You're here to talk about Jewish a cappella music, but let's get a little bit of background about you, about how you got into the role that you're in now in Jewish a cappella in 613.
Sure. So it's kind of a long story. I'll try and make it as quick as I can. So I grew up in a musical family. My grandfather, who a lot of people know, his name is Sam Block. He actually was the director of Camp Raleigh. So in the modern Orthodox world, I think that's Yichus. He's also a tremendous piano player. His brother, Jack Block, was a professional violinist and woodwind player. And then my uncle, Danny Block, is a pro sax player. He was the sax player for Schlock Rock. So my mom's side of the family is always into music. And I started taking violin lessons before I was 4 years old. I never got so great at it, but I had a lot of music going on in my life at a very young age. And then I started singing in school, in middle school, a little later maybe than some people who sing. So I went to North Shore Hebrew Academy through 8th grade. And I was doing some singing there. And then when I went to high school, I went to Ramaz for high school in the city. And there they have really still do have a tremendous choir and music program. So that's where I learned a lot. And when I was in 11th grade, the person who had been running the choir retired. Her name was Carol Goldberg, an amazing choral director. And a new person came in. His name is Daniel Henkin, which if you know anything about Jewish a cappella music, you've for sure heard that name. He had
and for those out there who don't know a lot about Jewish a cappella music, you want to describe who that is?
Yeah, so Daniel Henkin started out. So he went to Ramaz himself. He grew up. Actually, he's Rav Henkin's grandson, which is very interesting. He started singing a cappella in college in Columbia, and then he was the director of Queens College Hillel's Tizmoret, and still is. He also was, before he came to Ramaz, he was the choir director and music teacher at two schools, Yeshiva Flatbush, and also a school, Schechter, in New Jersey, of Essex and Union, which is now called Golda Ak Academy, which is where I am the current music teacher and choir director. And he also directs choirs at Camp Nesher, Camp Ramah in the Berkshires. And he is more known than the previous director at Ramaz for like contemporary a cappella type style. So he came in when I was going into 11th grade. That's when that change was made in school. And I really learned a lot from him. And with him is where I started singing in sort of that, what we would call the contemporary a cappella idiom. So that's sort of how it all got started. And then when I was a senior in high school, we actually did a show that until pre-COVID was happening yearly, called Acapajuza, which is an a cappella concert in New York City hosted by 613. And that, they always have 613 perform, and then maybe another professional group and a couple student groups, like a college group and a high school group usually. So when I was in 12th grade, 613 was a headliner of that show. A few of the other groups that performed was a reunion concert for a group called Bitachon, which is very important in Jewish a cappella history.
Which we'll definitely get to.
Yeah. And as well as the very early Maccabees, pre-Candlelight, anybody basically knowing who they were when they were just the Yeshiva University Maccabees, and the Ramaz High School Chamber Choir, which I was in. And we actually sang, instead of 613 singing this song, one song that was in our repertoire was 613's original Al Hanisim, which is probably the most often covered Jewish a cappella song that there is. And we sang that to open that show, and I sang the solo for that, and actually there is where I started to get into sort of professional a cappella singing while I was still in high school, because a few people who were there were very involved in that world, and a few of them tried to recruit me into a couple different things. I don't know how detailed you want me to get, but I'm basically going to keep talking.
We have editors.
So two important, high-paid team.
That's right.
So two important people who I met that night are somebody named Jordan B. Gorfinkel, who is an incredibly talented person, but one of the things that he's involved in is he was one of the original, maybe not founding members actually, but very instrumental in Bitachon. Not instrumental, but he was so he was a Bitachon guy, and that was what he was doing there. But he at that time, and actually also now, although there was a name change for a little bit in the middle, was one of the directors of a very, very busy a cappella group / agency performing at Simchas called Kol Zimra. So I met him, and he said, "Are you free on April 20th? We have a bunch of gigs that weekend." And he had heard me sing a solo, and I was a senior. I was getting a little bit older, and he asked if I would come on an audition gig for a Shabbos. And that's sort of like one whole area of Jewish a cappella, which is something I did for many, many, many years. And then the other person I met was somebody named Mike Boxer, who was and is the director of 613. He actually heard me sing the song, and he said our high tenor, which I am not really, is going to be leaving the group next year, and we're looking for somebody to fill his shoes. Would you please come down and audition for 613? Which I was a huge fan, so it was very exciting for me. I've always loved 613 ever since I first heard them, I think, at a concert at the Great Neck Synagogue when I was like 11, when they were just getting started. Two of the original members were actually Great Neck Synagogue alum, yeah, member families. So their Blue Fringe came in for a show, and they were like, "Oh, we'll let these new guys 613 like open for them." And sure enough, so that was the first time I heard them. But so when I met Mike at this Acapajouza concert, he had asked me to come audition. So later on that year, I actually auditioned for 613. This was the spring of 2009. So I auditioned for 613 and was promptly rejected from the group, which is a fun story. But actually, that would have a big influence a little bit later on. But the meeting Jordan Gorfinkel and getting involved with that sort of Shabbos improv a cappella world is what really kept me very, very busy for a few years following. It sort of took me a year or two to like get really busy, but then once I did, it was like crazy. So that was really, really big for me. And while all that was going on, I also, I guess, have like a little bit of an entrepreneurial streak. So in addition to doing that gig for Kol Zimra, I also, my mom's very close friend in Great Neck, where I lived in the Young Israel, was making a bar mitzvah. So I said, okay, you don't have to pay all this money to bring in these a cappella singers. Let me bring in the other 7 male members of the Ramaz Chamber Choir. Will all come in for the weekend. I did it for like, I remember we each got paid like $100, and we'll sing at your bar mitzvah. So I was sort of like, I started doing it myself and working for other people almost at exactly the same time.
Oh, wow. All right. And wait, so how did you end up getting into 613?
Okay,
so you were rejected in 2009.
I was rejected in 2009. And then in 2012, 2013, so between 2009 and the next few years, especially in like 10 and 11, I started getting busy with these Shabbos gigs, they're called, working for the different groups that send guys to places to entertain at Simchas, as well as sort of booking some of my own work. And so people were starting to find out who I was, find out about me, what I could do, my skill set. And so a few years later, in 2012, pretty sure it was 2012, might have been 13, Mike Boxer, who I hadn't really heard from except we ended up on 1 or 2 improv gigs together, just by chance. He emailed me, and he said, Craig, we're not looking for a new member in 613, but we have this trip. We booked this gig, a Shabbos gig in Israel. There's a very, very, wealthy family from Europe somewhere that's making a special Shabbat Chatan and Kala, which is what they do as opposed to like how an Ashkenaz family might do like an Ufraf and a Shabbos Kala. So they do it all together, and they want to hire our group to come out, and we need like an extra guy to come and learn our show, basically. So learn parts to our stuff. And we want to find out if you would be interested in coming to Israel. It's not really paying a lot, but we'll cover your flights to and from Israel. You can take a trip to Israel. And, let me know if you're interested in coming on this gig in Israel. It's, I think he was very clear that they weren't looking for somebody to be in the group, but they knew what I could do. They knew that I could fill in for this gig, learn their show. And basically, as payment for learning their show, you get a trip to Israel.
Now, was this like a 7th member of the group, or was this filling in for somebody just for the show?
Yeah, it was just for the show. We always, our concert performance is always in a group of 6. Sometimes, actually, it's interesting because I didn't even need to learn the music for the Shabbos gig, which is why we're being brought out. But of course, if we're going to get flown out to Israel, or not we at the time, but 613, so 613 wanted to also be able to put on a show of their actual material.
Right.
So we booked some place on a Thursday night prior to Shabbos to do a show, so I had to learn all the parts for that show. So I would be one of the 6 guys going to that show. Then I was actually on the fence because I was in college and I couldn't really take off enough time, so I would have to, only go for like 3 nights or 4 nights, whatever it was. And the flying, it was a huge deal. I'm not really getting paid so much at that point for it, and it's like I wasn't sure whether I would do it or not. And before I got a chance to answer him, Mike contacted me and said, in addition to somebody for this gig, it looks like we have a pretty busy calendar, and we have our main 6 guys in the group, which is actually not how it is now, but it is how it was then. We have our main 6 guys in the group, and we always have a team of backups. That actually team, I don't know if I'm even supposed to say this, but I'm sure it's fine. That team was referred to for many, many years as 614. It no longer exists, but for many years it was. But he said, we know you're good. Like he said before, we know that you can learn the parts. We know you could sing solos. We know you're good. And so in addition to coming on this Israel trip, if you take the time to learn all these parts and come on this trip with us, you'll be in the rotation of backups for gigs when certain guys couldn't make it. So I knew that I wanted to do more gigging, especially like the more concert type. At that point, I wasn't doing so many weddings or a weeknight and Sunday
It was basically
gigs.
Shabbos.
It was just Shabbos. So I'm like, okay, I have all this available time. I love music. This is what I want to do. At least part-time back then is what I thought. This is what I want to do. So I'd love to fill out my calendar. I love 613. The music is really fulfilling. And maybe if there's ever a spot that opens up in the future, I'd be considered for it if I'm
inside track.
Yeah, exactly. So that's how it started, and I went on the trip and I did a bunch of gigs with 613. And it's a long story, but if you want, I'll keep going because it's
fine. If you want to, let's cut to the chase.
Okay. So here's what happened. A year later, a guy named Noah Aronson, who was only in the group for a little bit of time, he was leaving the group. And I put my name forward as somebody, it was kind of weird because we always got together once a month for a full 614 rehearsal. So the members of 613 and all the backups, there are probably like 12 of us at that point, or 10 of us total. And we got together once a month, and at those rehearsals, they would discuss what's going on in the group, and it'd be like, okay, we're looking for a new member. And it was kind of like, oh, hello, like I want to be considered. And then when I had a discussion with the director, he said, I will definitely consider you, but like, you're so valuable to us in what you're doing now. You can learn parts really quickly that we'd rather add somebody new so that you could keep doing what you're doing. And I actually wrote him this email that was basically like, I appreciate all the opportunities, and if I'm not the best person for the job, then so be it. But, I don't think it's 100% equitable, so to speak, for you to not give me the opportunity to have more gigs and be on the recordings and the albums, because back then only those 6 guys were in the videos or on the CDs and stuff like that, and the other guys were just doing gigs. So I said, if I'm not the best, that's fine. But it's not really right to not even let me try if the only reason is because, I'm good at what I do now, which is a lesser role. So
it's like the James Harden, keep him as a 6th man,
yeah,
or make him the star in somewhere else.
Yeah, I mean, Lahavdil. Yeah, he's got a more Rebbesh beard than me.
That's
anyway.
true. Maybe James Harden wishes he was Craig Resmovits.
Yeah, there you go. So, and then he said, okay, so we'll consider you. You make a good point, but I don't need to bring you in for an audition because we all know what you could do. I said, no, you're bringing me in for an audition, and I made them audition me. And it's funny, the first time when I got rejected when I was in high school, it took like 6 months for the group to get back to me because they were seeing all these different people at different nights that didn't get together so often. The second time I auditioned, which was probably in 2013 or 14, I'd have to check, I got a phone call on my way home from the audition. So it was very fulfilling the way that all happened, and I felt pretty validated after that.
I don't know if you listen to stand-up comedy at all. If you know Gabriel Iglesias.
Oh, I love Fluffy. Yeah.
So for those who don't know, but you can check it out. But he has an audition story. And it sounds exactly like that when he auditioned for a movie.
Yeah.
It's exactly that story.
Yeah. So, well, I'm in good company.
Which we
then.
will not link to on our social media. You can
Definitely
go find
not.
it if you want to, but it's out there.
Yeah.